Hello everyone, this is Wrestling Watcher, a YouTube channel that's about watching professional wrestling. So in this video I wanted to talk about Roman Reigns, specifically. And, 2025 Roman Reigns is where Hulk Hogan was in 92 and 93. He's where Austin was, arguably, in 2001, going into 2002. Although not so much pronounced with him, but I think it's still an accurate statement. He's where John Cena was in 2014 onward to 2018. That 4-year range there with him, I would say. And what I mean is that he is head and shoulders more over than the entire roster. Head and shoulders. He's more over than CM Punk. He's more over than Seth. I think he's more over than Cody. If I had to guess, I think Roman Reigns probably gets a bigger reaction than Cody Rhodes. He's just more over than all of them, right? And he's going to be doing the Hollywood thing soon, and he's going to be I think he's going to be a big Hollywood star in the next couple of years. So he is more head and shoulders over than everybody. So I think it makes it harder for the company to push him because it exposes the entire roster for how much less they are when compared to Roman. I mean, we look at the Vision, right? This new Seth Rollins heel group that's formed. Seth Rollins, Bronson Reed, Braun Breaker, and Paul Heyman. Now, I think it's going well. I think it's a good heel stable. I think it's a bit rinse and repeat sort of thing. But I think it's a good, solid stable. No questions about that. And I think it's doing good work for Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed. They're getting main event tag team matches on Raw. They're getting Paul Heyman with them. They're getting that exposure. They're getting that solid, slow, steady push where they're in the main events of the TVs on a weekly basis, so you're going to be seeing them and thinking of them as main eventers. No problem. But when we look at the Vision compared to the Bloodline, and I realize this could be an unfair statement because the Bloodline had, 4 or 5 years of solid storytelling behind it. The Vision doesn't have that. It started basically at WrestleMania and 41, and it's gone from there. But Seth is not as over as Roman. Maybe it's a weird comparison, right? Because if you take when the Bloodline started, when Roman came back at that SummerSlam back in 2020, and he interfered in that Braun Strowman and The Fiend match, and then a week later you see that infamous image now of Paul Heyman sitting next to Roman, and then he wins the title at that Payback in that triple threat match where he walks out with the contract and then signs it, gets into the ring and wins. I'm talking 5 years ago when the Bloodline first started. Seth Rollins today versus that Roman Reigns. Who's more over? I would make an argument even that Roman Reigns would be more over than the Seth Rollins of today. I understand Seth Rollins gets huge pops, but that Roman Reigns had already headlined 4 WrestleManias. So when you think about it, it's like, it's a strange thing because you could argue with me that Seth Rollins in 2025 gets a bigger pop than when Roman came out back in 2020, but Seth has never been considered the top guy. Roman was, so it's always going to be perceived that Roman was more over, and that messes with the perception of how you view this stable, and it messes with the perception of how you view the entire roster, right? But look, it takes time to get people over. The point is, all the major stars that were always head and shoulders above everyone, they had to get pulled back periodically, right? I mean, sometimes that was by disappearing. Hulk disappeared in 92 after that WrestleMania 8. He didn't come back till that next year's WrestleMania 9. Now, he did one. Now, look, there was other circumstances beyond that. We understand that. John Cena in 2014, if you go back and look, he was cutting better promos than everyone by far. he was getting massive reactions. He was at the top of his game as a professional wrestler, but they had to pull him back. He had to lose matches. He lost more big matches that year than he won, and they had to pull him back so other guys could get over. And that's the nature of the business. You know, you can only, one guy has to lead the band. One guy has to be out front and be the top guy. But if they get so far above everyone else, ahead of everyone else, that it messes with the perception of the show, because there's this one guy on top, then everyone else behind him that's just sort of, you know, there. You don't want that. So it's going to be interesting to see how they manage this, because Roman gets head and shoulders a better reaction than anybody. Now, I think Triple H is using him smartly. You know, it's sort of like, what's the old term? You know, the rub, you know, the dust, the Hulk dust, the John Cena dust. When you put a wrestler with someone in a promo or a segment, you know, they get that, you know, dust, you know, that rub effect where it's like you're brushing shoulders with the top guy. I think they're using Roman very wisely with Jey Uso, where Jey Uso is sort of getting that Roman dust. Now look, he was getting it all along, but it was different because when he was with the Bloodline, he was sort of a supporting character behind Roman. But now that Jey Uso, what he's doing as a main event guy on Raw by himself, having won a world title, he's now more the main character of his own story, getting the rub from Roman, who's helping him. So it's more that Roman dust, that Roman sort of rub, as it were, in old school wrestling terms. And one could argue that Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed are getting the exact same thing, especially Bronson Reed. They're in a story with him. I think I made a video on this. The Shula Fala, the tribal thief. These are all things, these are terms being bestowed upon Bronson Reed to help push him. But, you know, WrestleMania is going to be interesting. It looks like they're building up for Roman versus Seth, but does Roman really need another WrestleMania main event? It feels like someone else should be in that spot. Feels like Roman should have a legacy match with somebody. Look, if you want to have Roman versus Seth, fine. But that doesn't need to be a main event. That doesn't need to be for a title. It will be. It would be. Definitely. It would be both of the things. A title and a main event. But we'll see. But, you know, Roman right now, and he's still a young guy, 39, going on 40 or something like that. He's great shape. 40, you know, with the way athletics are now, where we understand athletic sports and science and nutrition better, 40 is, for these athletes, is still considered prime in some cases. But it'll be interesting because they got to get other guys pushed. They just do. Because they can't just rely on Roman like this forever. And that's obvious by the booking. Because he's there, but he's not at the tippy top. They're keeping him away from the main event matches so other guys can get shine. That's good booking. But Roman is definitely in that spot where he's the tippy top guy, head and shoulders above everyone, but he can't be treated like it because it hurts the rest of the roster when he is. That's going to be all for this one, guys. Thank you.